You know, the world has taken certain holidays and distorted them, changed them around, and given different symbols. Of course, often today, the symbol for Easter is, of course, the old Easter egg. In fact, I believe a bunny was in here earlier today, and there's a few Easter eggs around in the pews in front of you. Yeah. Hang on to those, because I want you to look at those in a minute. Jeremy was born with a variety of disabilities. He attended a small church, and he was having more and more problems fitting in, communicating. Doris was his teacher. She often became exasperated with Jeremy, but she kept trying. Well, the Sunday before Easter, she had given the children an Easter egg, a plastic Easter egg, much like the one you have. And she said, next Sunday, bring them back with something in it that you think represents Easter. Well, she wasn't sure if Jeremy really understood the assignment. So she had thought about calling Jeremy's parents. But during that week, she had a rough week. Plumbing problems at home, other issues, and she just didn't get to call Jeremy's parents. Well, Sunday morning, the kids brought their Easter eggs in, brought them up to Doris's desk, and she was opening them. One had a flower in it, of course, spring. That's good. She opened them, and she got to about the fourth or fifth egg. And if you want to open your egg, it was just like the one that you have in your hand. It was empty. She said, that's Jeremy's. So she just kind of set it aside, didn't want to embarrass him. And he said, Miss Miller, aren't you going to say anything about my egg? And she said, but Jeremy, your egg is empty. He said, yes, ma'am. Isn't that the idea? See, Jesus, they killed him and they buried him, but his tomb was empty. Isn't the egg supposed to be empty? Isn't that what it's all about? In Mark chapter 16, the day after the Sabbath day, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James and Salome, bought some sweet-smelling spices to put on Jesus' body. Very early on that day, the first day of the week, soon after sunrise, the women were on their way to the tomb. They said to each other, "Who will roll away for us the stone that covers the entrance of the tomb?" Then the women looked and saw that the stone had already been rolled away, even though it was very large. The women entered the tomb and saw a young man wearing a white robe and sitting on the right side, and they were afraid. But the men said, "Don't be afraid. You are looking for Jesus from Nazareth, who has been crucified. He is risen from the dead. He is not here. Look, here is the place they laid him. Now go and tell his followers and Peter, Jesus is going into Galilee ahead of you, and you will see him there, as he told you before." The women were confused and shaking with fear. So they left the tomb and ran away. They did not tell anyone about what happened because they were afraid. Emptiness. This morning, I want to draw your attention to the promise of emptiness. The emptiness of the tomb. See, Jeremy got it. He understood. See, the emptiness of the tomb reminds us of our own emptiness. And as I go through life, there are times that I just feel empty. I feel like nothing that life has to offer really satisfies. You know, I feel like I work and maybe I'm the only one like that. Maybe you don't ever feel this way. And then maybe you do. Maybe you feel like you work 40 and 50 and 60 hours a week, and you work hard, and you work, and you work, and you work. And then you get paid, and by halfway through the pay period, you look and you've got a lot more month with a lot less money left. And you wonder, what am I working for? And then you start working, and you start looking forward to retirement. And then you start looking and saying, you start figuring that Social Security check, and you say, how in the world am I supposed to survive on that? And you figure, okay, so much for retiring. And then you keep going. And you just feel like it's one thing after another. And then there's problems with life. Just all kinds of things go on. You know, sometimes life can really just feel empty. Jesus came to make life count. In fact, he said himself, I have come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. Have it to its fullest extent. And see, the emptiness of the tomb reminds me that on my own, life is just full of emptiness and empty promises. You know, the world is just full of empty promises. But God makes promises that He keeps. Read a story this week of a young man that was graduating from high school. And in the particular neighborhood that he lived in, by the way, it's not the neighborhood I lived in, or have ever lived in, or will ever live in. But in his particular neighborhood, the custom and tradition was that on graduation night, the graduates got a new car for high school graduation. I didn't live in that neighborhood. Okay? Well, for a month or so before graduation, he and his dad had been shopping and really looking at cars. And on graduation night, his father presented him a brand new Bible and said, "Son, this is the most important gift I have ever given you." Junior got kind of upset. Threw the Bible down, stormed out, and never spoke to his father again. Years later, his father passed away. Junior had come back and was going through some stuff. And there he found that same Bible that his dad had given him on graduation night. And he opened it. And there inside the Bible was a cashier's check in the exact amount of the car that they had looked at and he decided on. What he thought was an empty promise was a father giving him more, giving him what he wanted, plus what he needed. And that's what we have in God. That's what we have. And God fills our emptiness with His fullness. His fullness in everything. You see, the emptiness of the tomb promises a fullness of His presence. A fullness of the presence of God. The presence of Jesus. Knowing that we never walk through life alone. That we're never in this by ourselves. That we've got more. That we're not alone. Reminded of a song we sing some. I remember when we sang it together, and I sang it with our quartet years ago. There's a line that says, "I don't know a thing in this whole wide world that's worse than being alone." And we don't have to be alone, because we always have the presence of God in our life. He's promised. In fact, Jesus said, as He was ascending back to heaven to be with His Father, His final words to his disciples on this earth was, "Lo, I am with you always." Always. Even to the end of the world. Even to the end of the world. That's the promise we have. The promise of the fullness of God's presence in our life. So when we look at the empty tomb, yeah, the tomb was empty. But we know that the presence of Jesus is always there with us. The emptiness of the tomb promises a fullness of overflowing hope. A fullness of overflowing hope. You know, when the women were going to the tomb, they had one worry. Who's going to roll the stone away? Well, as they get there, they see that the stone's rolled away. Problem solved. Right? Except they were concerned that the stone needed to be rolled away so they could get in and anoint the body, take care of the body of Jesus. Well, the stone was rolled away, but the body wasn't there. And by the way, I believe with every ounce of my being that the stone was rolled away not to let Jesus out, but to let others in. Jesus didn't need the stone rolled away to get out of the tomb, but the stone had to be rolled away for the women to get in and for the others to get in to see that Jesus was gone, that his body was gone. But their hope was, in fact, there's an account of some couple of men who were walking to Emmaus, on the road to Emmaus from Jerusalem, and they were walking and really discouraged after the crucifixion, after the death of Christ, and Jesus had resurrected, and he just joined them. He just kind of appeared and joined them, walking with them. And he starts talking with them. And the first thing he said is, "What's the matter, guys? Why are you so sad? Why are you so torn up?" And they said, "Well, are you the only one that doesn't know what's going on here? This Jesus? We put all of our hope in him. We had everything invested in him. And now they crucified him." Now, there are some that say he was resurrected, that he rose from the dead, but how do you believe that? You know, believing in a resurrection, it's easy to believe in the concept, but to believe in the reality, that's a little bit different, because that's hope. And that was when these women saw that the tomb was empty. They knew that something's going on here, and that maybe everything Jesus had said was true. And that their hope in him truly was for real and was justified. You see, it's that empty tomb that gives us hope of eternity. Because of the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross. And don't ever forget about the cross. Don't get wrapped up so much in the resurrection that you forget about the cross. Because the cross has to come first. And were it not for, because if it were not Jesus, the Son of God, the perfect Son of God, the perfect sacrifice on the cross, there would never have been a resurrection. So we can't forget about the cross. But with that sacrifice on the cross, then came the resurrection as proof of who was on the cross. And that is proof that we have hope. Hope of a future. Hope of eternity with God. The emptiness of the tomb promises the fullness of his power. The power of God. How much power does it take to raise the dead? I don't know. I can't put that in human terminology because I don't know any human that can do it. I've never seen it done. Now I've seen some medical miracles. I've seen some folks brought back through CPR, and I've seen some things like that are miraculous and that really push the limits. But Jesus was crucified, beaten, tormented, and was resurrected from the dead. That's power. The power of God. And I want to tell you something, brothers and sisters. The same God that can resurrect Jesus from the dead, this same power can be used in your life to give your life meaning and purpose and make your life better and different and make your life make a difference in the world today because of the power of God through Jesus Christ. That is the promise of emptiness that we see in the empty tomb. You see, when we look in the empty tomb, when I look in the empty tomb, I see my emptiness. I see hope. I see power. And I see salvation. So maybe the tomb isn't as empty as we say it is. Maybe there's more in the tomb than we give credit. What the tomb is full of is God and his power. His power to make a difference in your life and mine. So this morning, as we think of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, as we think of his sacrifice, as we think of his love for each one of us, his atoning sacrifice for you and for me, I ask you, where do you stand with God? Where do you stand in your relationship with Jesus Christ? Where do you stand at the cross? Do you stand at the foot of the cross trusting simply in Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world. Asking Him to forgive, asking Him to, thanking Him for His sacrifice, giving yourself to Him in obedience. And then as He was buried in the tomb, are you willing to submit your life to His by being buried in the watery grave of baptism, rising forth as He was resurrected as a new person, a child of God, a new person, a child of the King? As a Christian, are you truly living for God, living the Christian life for Jesus in all that you do? If you need to respond to God's invitation, come now.